Captain Reve, an exclusive hero who is a defender for the Curse faction. We're going to go into everything there is to know about Captain Reve, his interesting niche details, how to use him, how to build him, what stat priority to put on him, and some interesting placements and usages for him in the game. So to kick things off, we'll talk about his faction first, then we'll go into his stats. Captain Reve belongs to the Curse faction, which is predominantly an AoE damage focused faction. You can see their stat bonuses are mainly applied based on the enemy being stunned, slowed, frozen, immobilized, all these other CC effects. It's quite good actually, because Captain Reve, although he's not a great damage dealer, he can actually deal some good damage in AoE, but mainly he has two very powerful ways of applying crowd control effects, which we'll go into in just a second with his skills. So his faction is actually pretty well aligned for him, honestly. He's really good at supporting and enabling other AoE heroes, such as Vierna or Zealous or Iona. So with that, let's take a look at his stats. He has a block of 3, which is pretty standard, a cost of 19, which is again fairly standard for defenders, and a standard revival time. He attacks one tile in front of him as well. Regarding his stat line, Captain Reve actually has one of the highest base HPs in the game, especially for the defenders. He has actually one of the highest base attacks in the game for the defenders, and he has a really high base defense. So as per the stat line, as far as that goes, Captain Reve has really good base stats, great HP, great attack, and decent defense. As far as stats go, the only negative for Captain Reve is that his base attack interval is 3.5 seconds. It is a very slow attack. But it makes sense when you see his kit, which we'll get into right now. So, his talent, for every 4 enemy units killed, increases his attack speed by 10, permanently up to 100 bonus. So when he's killed 4 enemies, he gains 10 attack speed. If this keeps happening up to 40 enemies slain, he gains 100 attack speed. So that helps him out with his base interval being so bad. He does deal magic damage, which is something important to say. So he is pretty good in content that requires magic damage dealt. And his base attack is just 100% damage to one enemy, going up to 120% with skill ups. His ultimate though, Boiling Brine, is really where Captain Reve shines. This is where a lot of utility comes from for him. During his ultimate, each attack deals 200 up to 220% AoE damage to multiple enemies around him, and it inflicts a 1 second stun on them, up to 1.5 second stun with max skill ups. This AoE stun and AoE damage is dealt every single attack for 20 to 25 seconds, and it has a 1100 down to a 900 rage cap. So it's not a very high rage cap, and the duration is very long. 20 to 25 seconds is a long time, and every single swing is going to be applying a 1 to 1.5 second stun based on skill ups. That is actually quite a lot of damage, and it is actually a lot of CC. That's a lot of stun effects going on. There's a lot of windows for curse heroes to deal more damage if you have a Aeon, or even just with a Nero for the very small increase. So even just with his ultimate Boiling Brine, he's already enabling the AoE damage from the Curse faction quite well. It's also just slowing down the enemies with all the constant freezes and stuns. It's interrupting their attacks. It's just a very nice ultimate generally. It's also quite a large range. I think it's at least 2 tiles away from him. So moving on to his first passive, Pact with the Drowned. So again, this is another one that plays massively into the Curse faction. He passively inflicts a 50% slow around him, so any adjacent tile to him, including his own tile, a 50% slow to 5 enemies within that range, and it goes up to 10 enemies. So up to 10 enemies will be slowed by 50% as long as they're either in his tile, like walking through him, or his adjacent tiles. Again, it's not insane, but I find this very useful in Arena, for Group Arena, which I'll go over later in the video, and I find it just incredibly good at enabling the Curse faction. So you could use him in Gear Raid 1, sit him in the middle of the enemies, make him really tanky with his insane base HP, and just have him applying this to loads of enemies around him to just really easily trigger the Curse bonus damage. And moving on to his second passive, Abyssal Envoy. When attacking enemy targets under control, so his slow or his stun or other effects similar, he restores 3 all the way up to 7% of his own max HP per attack. Again, a fairly slow base attack interval, but he is more offensively focused. He will be attacking a lot. He is applying constant CC effects, so he's able to slow himself quite a lot. It's really quite a nice passive. It does give him some really good self-sustain, which is really important if you do want to try and use him in Gear Raid 1. And finally, he has more effects. As you can see here, 2 more effects pop up. The first one, Sunken Treasure. Obtain the hero Razak to unlock the following bonus effect. Gold obtained through battle is increased by 6%. So this is another bond skill like we saw with Vierna and Silas. This just means if you have both Razak and Captain Reve, they're both gaining benefits. So this will be increasing gold gain passively by 6%, assuming you have Razak, but if you don't have Razak, or even if you do, just blanket, you gain 6% gold increase anyway. So if you have both, it's 12% gold increase. If you only have Captain Reve, it's 6%. If you only have Razak, he has his own bonuses to XP gain. So yeah, it's just some extra gold gain. It's really nice. It's really helpful. It does grant you some more efficiency from your gold farming. It is a bit of annoying that this is locked behind having such an exclusive hero, because Captain Reve is only available during very limited events. So it's kind of a pain that they've done that, but it is what it is. In terms of skill ups where you want them to roll, his ultimate is of course the most important. You want the increased stun, you want the increased effect duration. Generally, I wouldn't prioritize Captain Reve's skill ups over most DPS in the game, but it is quite nice. His slow is quite good as well, though I don't think it's super important, and his restoration as well. You're going to want a healer on him anyway most of the time, so I don't think this is as important. I would focus hoping for his ultimate to max first, and I would probably stop once I maxed his ultimate. So we're going to talk about his awakenings next, and then I'm going to give some thoughts on how I think the hero should be used, and I'll show my Captain Reve that I use currently on the Forerunner server. So the first awakening, every 4 attacks landed, the next attack deals 150% AoE damage to enemies in range and inflicts stun. I don't have this awakening, but I believe it's basically one of his ultimate swings for free every 4 seconds, maybe with a slightly shorter range. The second awakening is some more base HP, which is it's always good. This actually goes into the base HP value, so this will be granting bonus scaling on any of his gear with HP bonus on it. The third awakening increases the slowing effect when his ultimate is active. It doesn't say, but I'm guessing it's to 75% from 50%. The fourth awakening is minus free cost, which is nice, I guess, but not incredibly necessary. And the final fifth awakening is when he kills surrounding enemies, it increases the duration of his ultimate by 1 second up to 10 seconds. So overall, I don't think these awakenings are incredible, to be honest. The fifth one is interesting, but if he's killing them anyway, then it doesn't matter all that much. The first one is quite nice, but not incredibly necessary, as again, his ult comes up quite reliably. So overall, I would say his doesn't really need his awakenings. I wouldn't worry too much about it. I wouldn't blow any legendary Sage Soul Stones into him, even though he is a limited hero. I don't think he really needs them. So with that kind of covers the basics of the character and his skills and stats. He's kind of a toss-up between two things. You can use him as a normal defender. He is a defender. I actually used him on my Forerunner account to great success as a defender to help get me through the game. But as you can see from his kit, he doesn't have any survivability passives beyond some health restore. He doesn't have any self-shielding. He doesn't have any invulnerability windows. He doesn't have unyielding. He doesn't have any invincibility. He doesn't protect his allies in any way. So because of that, I don't actually like to use Captain Reve as a defender. I actually prefer to build him as a DPS. Now, that seems pretty weird, of course. He's not a DPS, he's a defender. He has slightly less scaling on his damage, and he's not going to compete with a fighter. But still, he has a nice kit. He supports the cultist faction, he applies some really good crowd control, and he can do some good damage. So even though he's not really a proper DPS, he's not a mage, he's not a fighter, he can still help and supplement in decent ways, and he's still going to be a great defender even if you build him more attack focused. So personally, I don't build him as a defender at all. I prefer to use even the epic defenders over Captain Reve when it comes to actually using a defender. Because someone like Olag has crazy self-shielding, someone like Baron has crazy self-shielding plus unyielding state. Even if you're using the fusible Livian, she is granting herself a massive amount of physical damage reduction, which helps quite a lot. So yeah, generally I would prefer to use other defenders if I want them to actually be defenders. For Captain Reve, and I'll show you mine, I build him more as a fighter. So this is my Captain Reve on the Forerunner server. I don't think he's well built, he's not great. It's just what I use him for, and he does a good job at what he's being used for. So I currently have him in the Glacier set as it scales on his max HP, which he does have a pretty good amount of. It's not my preferred set for him, but it's what I use him for currently. And I give him the Whirlwind set as he does need some attack speed to get his attacks up faster. He does have a really bad base interval of 3.5. At 130 bonus attack speed, he's still only attacking every 2.4 seconds, but that is a marked improvement from 3.5. So what do I actually gear him in? Well, as you can see, it is attack bonus, crit damage, and attack bonus. This is pretty standard as if he was an actual fighter. I have tried to pick up some HP bonus, and it's probably better to build him more HP focused than I have in this. But he has really good base HP, so even though he's got pretty rubbishy gear, he still has very good health. He's got a bunch of attack, a bunch of crit rate, though not enough crit rate, and he has some crit damage. And on his weapon sets, I've got the Whirlwind set to give him some attack speed, to pick up more HP, crit rate, and attack as well. And it's a similar story on his breastplate with HP, attack, and crit rate. Overall, in terms of gearing, you have two real choices. Either you build him like a bruiser and you take maybe the Glacier set and you maybe put some HP percent mains on him and pick up the attack and the crit rate in the substats, but you do want to pick up some attack speed as well. So either you pick that up in the substats or you use the Whirlwind set and ideally get an attack speed substat on the weapon as well. Or you build him all out DPS and you give him the Infernal Roar set from Gear Raid 3, which I don't have very good pieces of, and you just build him as a standard DPS. I find it quite hard to get good copies of this set though, so I haven't got him in it at the moment, but I think this is the best set to give him if you want to build him as a DPS, because his attack on his ultimate is scaling on his actual attack. You can see here, during the ultimate, each attack deals 220% AoE damage, so this will actually be multiplied by the Infernal Roar set for 40% more damage into this ultimate. It really does make him do crazy damage. So for Captain Reve, what sets should you use on him? Well, from the accessory sets, as I said, I prefer the Infernal Roar from Gear Raid 3. It is a lot of bonus damage. His ult scales on it. It's really good for him. Again, this is assuming you're building him as a DPS. I'll give you a second set of recommendations if you want to build him as a defender, just as a tank. But as a DPS, Infernal Roar, then probably Soulbound Arcana and Ageless Wrath or Ancient Wrath. Though I think Soulbound Arcana is not ideal as he has quite a long-lasting ultimate. So I would probably actually suggest the Glacier instead of it, as he has really good base HP. Those are the main two. I think Infernal Roar and Glacier are the best two for him. From the Gear Raid 1 sets, I would say probably the Warlord is the best because it gives him more attack speed, and I would say Whirlwind is really good as well. Though honestly, Immortal Warrior is quite good, and you could probably use almost any of these sets, but I would put Annihilating Might and Salvation at the bottom, but the rest of these sets can be pretty good on him in general. As for building him as an actual defender, I would probably prioritize using something like the Invigoration set just to help allies out more, because defenders aren't really that hard to build, or the Asclepius set for more base HP, or the Mana Spring to get his ultimate up more often, or probably my preference would be Guardian. I think Guardian is the best defender set in general, just for the flat damage reduction. And then when it comes to the Gear Raid 1 sets for more of a defender build, it would of course be the Immortal Warrior first, and then it would be the Life Force set after, just for some more HP scaling. So finally, from gear builds, what artifact to put on him? Personally, I prefer Olag's Wall. I think this is the best one to put on him, because it increases his block. That's all I really want, is to block more enemies because of how I personally choose to use him, which is mainly in the AoE PvP arena. Blocking more enemies makes it easier for him to trap more enemies in the bottleneck, which I'll show you shortly, and I find the Olag's Wall is the ideal set for him in that case. Outside of Olag's Wall, I think the Bloodthirst set is quite good to increase his actual damage output, but beyond that, you can kind of just use whatever you need to. The Regal Majesty will increase the healing he receives, which may be necessary if you're using him as a defender, because he doesn't have much actual tankiness in his abilities. He doesn't have anything built in that's going to grant him tankiness. You could give him the Death Knell artifact, which is a legendary, so it's a bit easier to get hold of, just to give him some more survivability if he does drop below a certain health threshold. But generally, it's not a big deal on his artifacts. So that covers everything about building Reve and gearing him and his skills and how he works. So the next thing is, how can you actually use him? Where do you actually use him? Generally, he'll be pretty good in a promotion raid because he can deal good damage. He deals good AoE damage, he applies good CC, good slows, and he's very tanky. So I do like him for general content more than most defenders. Honestly, if your defenders are not having any trouble staying alive, then Captain Reve is usually a better defender to use. I just don't like him too much in content where you really need to keep the defender alive because they're taking so much damage. But if you're finding your defenders are just surviving really easily, then Captain Reve is a great option. As for the resource raids, well, he's of course incredible in gold raid because he has a bonus for the gold drops, right? He's giving you bonus loot. So he's obviously top tier for the resource raids, and he's applying slows and AoE damage. So he's generally a good hero there anyway. The Curse faction is not a good faction for Guild Boss. He doesn't do anything to help with the Guild Boss. He focuses on AoE damage and there is only a single enemy. Yeah, he's not a Guild Boss hero in the slightest. So I'll show you how good he is in Gear Raid 1. I'll just use stage 18 and I'll stick him in front of the wall just so you can get an idea of how he would actually function. So his base attack is not going to be AoE. It's only his ultimate that's AoE. And so at the moment you can see he's hitting one enemy for a reasonable amount of damage, but it's going to be very slow at this rate. However, if you ultimate with him, it's actually quite good AoE damage, and that's without a Dolores boost. So I'll Dolores boost the next wave and you can see the difference in damage output. You can see the damage capping though on the number of targets hit. He wasn't hitting the entire wave at once. It looked to be around 10 enemies he was hitting per wave. So this time we'll boost his ult with Dolores and you can see the damage coming out. So that's nearly 200,000 damage, and again this is a pretty mediocre Glacier set. I think with Infernal Roar he's hitting closer to 300,000 damage per swing. So again we'll just boost him for this wave, and you can see he is easily massacring these waves. And something to note is every time he swings his anchor and stuns people, it is interrupting their attacks on the wall. So he is good at preventing damage to the wall because he's constantly controlling and slowing the enemies and damaging them. So he is really good at buying you time to get to the wall. But he does take quite a bit of damage, you can see. I've built him as a DPS, remember. He's not built as a defender right now. So we can keep ulting in unison to get the damage out, and he will evaporate these enemies before long. You can see there isn't even a lot of damage on the wall, so he is a very viable option. And this is, even without using him in conjunction with a mage like Vienna or Zealous or Iona, another curse mage who would benefit a lot from all of the CC that Captain Reve is constantly putting out. So you can see it's a pretty quick clear. He actually annihilated almost everything at a pretty good range. You can see he's reaching a couple tiles away, and they barely damaged the wall. Well, they did damage it by like 40%. No real risk there. So yeah, he's actually pretty good in Gear Raid 1. The later stages, it's a lot harder to keep him alive. So you can use him in stages 19 onwards, but it's going to be difficult keeping him alive against the enemies. As for the other Gear Raids, in Gear Raid 3, he's pretty much useless. He's not going to have anything to attack to trigger his ultimate, so he's not good in Gear Raid 3 at all. In Gear Raid 2, he can be okay. He is a defender. He does have great base HP. He does have decent defense, and he can deal some damage. But it's not great because he doesn't have any super survivable abilities or talents, so he will struggle quite a bit when the damage gets high, especially in the final 3 stages with the Shriek. He has nothing built into his kit to survive the Shriek, but he does provide some good additional damage to help deal with the waves. So there's 2 sides to it. If you're not having any trouble keeping him alive, then he'll be really good. It's another source of damage, it's another source of crowd control, stuns and slows to buy your healers more time. But he doesn't have anything innately in his kit to help him survive the massive damage coming out like the other defenders do. Gear Raid 2 is one of the content where you actually need proper defenders. Outside of the Gear Raids, he's actually quite good in the Artifact Material Raid. I'll turn off Power of Dominance and I'll show you what I mean. So I actually re-geared my Reve just to show you. I've replaced the crit damage main with a HP percent main just so he's more of a hybrid bruiser, because he was getting one shot by the Salazar boss ultimate. So this is stage 18 with the Power of Dominance turned off, and you can see the massive damage coming in from the boss. So Vortex can almost compete with the healing. These are both quite good geared, but it is a lot of damage coming out from the boss. But the good thing about Captain Reve, so long as he can survive the boss's ult, is when he has his ultimate activated, his AoE effects can affect these adds over here and help quite a bit in slowing them down, buying you some time to get more heroes down, and it's kind of nice damage as well. But yeah, he's not a purebred defender, and he will struggle at staying alive under the massive damage that the boss is putting out. So he does help, he does supplement the damage, he does apply some stuns to help bring these enemies down, but overall it's better to have a defender who can help his allies like Regulus, or have someone like Olag who can survive by themselves a bit better and is not as at risk of getting murdered by the boss. So I would say Captain Reve is pretty good in Artifact Material Raid, but you won't really be able to get away with building him as a DPS if you want him to actually tank. Though you could use him alongside an actual defender and have him DPS and stun the waves, because it would actually work quite well. He just won't be dealing as much damage to the boss. He's going to be super good in the faction trial, the basic trial, as you do need magic damage to deal with these enemies. His slows, his stuns, his area damage will be really good at locking down the approaching enemies that do hit very, very hard. So he's going to be really good in the basic trial. And in Tide, he's not going to be great. He does apply some good AoE, but he doesn't have a very high BP score. So that leaves us with Arena. And if you go to the hero rankings, he's not really going to be present anywhere. He is super rare, but you do see Captain Reve at rank 11, so he is considered to be one of the best for AoE Arena, and I do use him in my team. I'll show you a video now where you can see how I use him in my AoE Arena. It is built around supporting Vienna. That is the team. He is not going to murder everything by himself, but he is going to facilitate it. It's really good. So if you check out this team, you can see I have a hero which we don't have yet called Cerberus, just to help me with the starting wave. But I'll skip to the part where you can actually see Reve's usage. I have Vienna covering below. I have Reve blocking in the bottleneck. And his slow is buying a lot of time for Vienna, as well as triggering Aeon's bonus damage from the Curse faction. Reve's ultimate is also dealing some pretty good damage and helping me to deal with the enemy waves. Later on, I have a Valkyra placed behind Reve for some additional block. This is where Olag's wall is helping because it is preventing the wave from moving too fast. His passive 50% slow is helping quite a lot as well. His ultimate is killing the waves as well as trapping them in place. Overall, it's quite a tidy team. And I do even use an Aeon just so that I can pull the enemies in later if it gets to the final waves. But generally the power in this team is the ability to just annihilate waves in one cluster, because Captain Reve is basically bottlenecking them and trapping them together in one place. And you can see from the damage results, it's not great damage, but Vienna is absolutely massacring, so it's going to be hard to compete with her. Anyway, the final two pieces of content to talk about are the single target DPS and sustained DPS arenas. He is not going to be particularly good in single target. It's just not content that he shines in. He doesn't deal good single target damage. He doesn't support a curse team in there. It's going to be Nightmare and Infernal teams in single target. In sustained damage, you might be able to get away with using him a little bit because there are more enemies. But really, you need lots of damage output to get through the waves fast enough, so I wouldn't recommend him for sustained DPS. Finally, we have the campaign and the Void Rift. In the campaign, he can be quite good. The AoE damage covering multiple lanes will be really nice from his ultimate. He does have good base stats, so he can become a tank to use there. And in Void Rift, similarly as well, he can be quite good just to help get some additional CC and damage out. Overall, as a summary, Captain Reve is a pretty good hero to have. I think he has numerous benefits. One, of course, is his passive gold gain increase. Gold is a problem for a lot of people, so it does help. It's not insane, but it does help quite a bit. Two is that he helps facilitate a curse team, which is quite powerful and very necessary for Gear Raid 1, so it's just a more reliable slow and block for that. The third is that he's actually a fairly decent damage dealer by himself, though he does need pretty good gear to shine, and there will be other heroes that will do more damage than him. It's just kind of an interesting niche to have a defender that can do pretty reliable AoE magic damage, so there are areas in the game where that is especially good. And finally, he is a defender, so you can use him as a normal defender. That has some more offensive utility. So yeah, that's it for my guide video on Captain Reve. I hope you enjoy him. He is a pretty good hero to have. Even if you're just using the gold gain, it's something. So I hope you have a lot of fun with him, and I hope you find him useful. If you have any tips and tricks or opinions on him that you think might benefit other people, then please do leave them below in the comments, as it does generally help quite a lot of people out. So anyway, that's it for the video, guys. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Take care, and bye-bye.